Good morning and happy Sunday to you. I hope you are set up to have a beautiful day. I thought that I would kind of do a little bit of reflection over the past 6 years of living in Panama and different observations that I've made about the experience. So, the first thing I think about is when I first moved here. I knew that I was going to be leaving the US permanently. I was, selling my house. This was it. I was going to be full time in Panama and not looking back. And I did have like a plan C and D if I absolutely hated Panama. But I'd made 2 trips to Panama and had done some other travel with the intention of, looking at could I see myself living in these countries. And Panama just, really felt like home. Pretty much from when I first got off the plane. And so I was leaving without, looking back. I had just no ties back in the US. So I did have a moment because I almost like missed my plane. I think I had a connection somewhere from San Luis Obispo, California, where I was living. And I didn't even have time to like process. I was like, it was like running onto the plane, getting seated. And then I had the moment of like, oh my God, what am I doing? I thought I was going to have time to like leisurely walk through an airport and like say goodbye to my country and, have like a moment of processing and, this big thing that I was about to do. And I didn't have any of that because I almost, missed the flight. So while I was on the flight, I had all that, all that stuff, that energy, those feelings, coming to the surface. But most of it was just excitement. And I think because I, over the years, had adapted to taking risks and kind of, detaching from my attachment to security and that whole concept of forever. That took a long time for me to do. I was very attached to the idea of permanence, forever, the sameness of things. A lot of people don't like change. I definitely didn't like change. And over the years, I worked really hard at, changing my inner workings, my inner operating system so that I was someone who embraced change and became resilient, flexible, adaptable. So the first, I would say my honeymoon phase was definitely 6 months. Interestingly, so my honeymoon phase was cut short because then COVID happened and we went into quarantine here in Panama, which was very, very strict. So for the first 6 months though, and I think that that's like kind of an average honeymoon phase, it was awesome, right? I'm like exploring things and, going to new places and meeting people. The extrovert part of myself was in, full display and socializing, and everything was, kind of exciting and new and different. And it was really fun to meet other expats who also were, loving Panama and, chatted about how they created their new lives and different international people. So not just people from the US. I really liked that, there were European people, people from Canada. It just, it was like a more expansive experience than just being where I was in San Luis Obispo, which was just kind of very white, basically. It was a small town and it was a like retirement and college town, and yeah, there just wasn't a lot of like flavor. So it was I really appreciated being somewhere where there were people from all over the world with different stories, and that I did have some of those like test moments, right? You're definitely going to have the adjustment moments, and they're not comfortable, especially if you're here solo, right? Like, I didn't have any friends here, I didn't know anybody here. And to navigate those moments where like you just feel like you're going to break down a little bit, or those moments where you think, oh my God, what did I do? Was this a mistake? The moments where you doubt yourself, where you question whether this was the right decision. And that can come on by any number of things. I mean, it can just be the smallest of things. Not being able to find, Band-Aids in a store, or, just figuring out that, you need to do things a different way, and that just that little meltdown moment comes because it's challenging to adjust and adapt. Those are normal things. I mean, think about what you're doing, right? Leaving your home country and starting a new life in a new country. So that was about 6 months in that I kind of had the breakup with the honeymoon, but COVID and the quarantine was really a big part of that. Then we went into, the quarantine for like a year and a half. It was very challenging to navigate around. There were a lot of challenges, but then my introvert side was like, oh, this is nice. I can just stay in. I don't have to go out. I don't have to mingle. I don't have to, put on the social persona. That, was a long time, and it was very strict. One thing that I definitely see as a theme that has evolved in my 6 years of living in Panama is that my patience has actually gotten much, much better. It's not perfect, but I think before I moved to Panama, I didn't have a lot of patience. I wanted things to happen now. I didn't have patience to wait for things. Not necessarily like, being in line or things like that. It was more like larger processes or endeavors that I was doing. So for example, like when I first started looking for a house, I didn't have a lot of patience because I wanted to find something, quickly. I wanted to like be home already. Or in my, writing endeavors, like I want the book to be a bestseller. I don't want to just sell like 5 copies a month. And so now I actually have a lot more patience than I used to have. One example of that is the 2 years that I've been waiting to get a certificate of occupancy on the casita. I've had to go through a zoning change request, which we were granted, and then some other request that I don't know if it got lost in the paperwork. And it's not one of those things, I've kind of talked about before how like Panama is a little bit like the Wild West. So it's not uncommon to have houses that are not legal, basically. It's not uncommon. And I wanted to have the casita legal because this house is not even on the record. Pierre built it without any legal certificate of occupancy, because when I bought the property, it just showed as a land sale. Again, some of you might be like jaws dropping, like, what? But this is something that's common here. And I was fine with that. I did want to just have like the casita be legal. But now I am kind of thinking I do want to eventually try and get the house legal as well, because I do think I want to sell in like 9 years. And it's a lot easier to sell if they're both legal and permitted. But I've been pretty patient for the past 2 years. I think because it's not like there's a fear of, some kind of punishment. Like, if I was like 2 years overdue on my taxes in the United States, I'd be panicky. I'd be kind of frantic about it, because there'd be fines, there'd be, financial repercussions. But without that fear of having some kind of, disaster happening here, I've kind of just gotten into the like, all right, well, now we'll try the next thing. We'll try. I'm gonna try and get my attorney involved and see if, she can contact the municipal office and find out what's going on. And that's something that's definitely very different. Also, like when I had my car accident, I mean, I did lose my patience a few times, especially with the broker who turned out to be really useless and didn't know what she was talking about, my car insurance broker. But for 5 months without my car, I think I managed pretty well. I had set up ahead of time to buy heavy things. I had friends that let me borrow their cars, and I got the electric trike, and that was helpful just to go around town. I was frustrated and was not patient with getting the reimbursement, and that it was $1,000 less than what I actually paid to have the car fixed. But those things around money can be kind of inflammatory. Obviously it was for me. Nobody likes being, duped or feel like they're getting taken advantage of. And the company, at one point the insurance company had said, well, it's coming up on a year, so we can just write off this whole claim and we don't have to pay you anything. So they kind of just have that, they have that power and control, and I don't like that. I'm not patient when it comes to that. But I am more patient in how things evolve, things that you may or may not find day to day that you need or want in the grocery store, the hardware store. I think I was very lucky with my house build, or the renovation, that it took 8 months and it went along pretty much like clockwork. I probably would have not been very patient had there been delays or theft or just, unexpected things that would come up. We definitely had some unexpected things and we had some mistakes, but they were not huge. They were not of a huge expense, and they were manageable. And yeah, just I think in general, just my patience has gotten better, which really was like a lifelong lesson for me to try and become more patient. And so Panama has given me the patience that I've been seeking all of my life. Definitely, my stress level is way down. I mean, I've not really been like a high stress person, but before I left, or before I made the decision to leave, I had a lot of financial stress because my financial situation had changed after support from alimony was, going to be stopping. And I knew that I had like 2 years to, kind of come up with a plan. And, building up a coaching practice never came to fruition. And I started a business. It was a great idea, but I just didn't have the follow through and the like financial and spreadsheet knowledge that you need to have. But it was it was called Wine Duets, and it was a wine pairing cookie. And I had a butter, apricot, and sage cookie that went with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And then I had a roasted garlic, sun-dried tomato, and Parmesan cookie. And that was good with like Syrah and Pinot Gris. Oh my gosh, what a crazy experience that whole endeavor was. It was costly, but it was early after my divorce. I had the money. I kind of felt like it was an investment in education and building up my self-confidence after it being really so very low. I felt, very unworthy and lacked belief in myself and confidence. So I think it was money well spent in that sense, but it didn't have any, kind of a return. So the financial decision was like, what am I going to do? I could get a job, or I could look at alternative living options, which is what I did. I did all of those actually. I got a job. Then I realized like that doesn't align with having the time freedom that I want. And also just, it just wasn't a good thing for like long-term future visioning. Even if I were to get raises every once in a while, the cost of living, would be going up. And how would I manage health insurance and those kind of expenses? So the financial aspect was the motivating factor for me in leaving the US. Unfortunately, 2 years after I moved here, the job that I had, I was doing leadership and communication coaching for an online company, and that company kind of went under and dissolved. And so I started looking for jobs. Now I had to look only online, and everything had, kind of changed. Like I had to join LinkedIn, and there's all this like networking, and your resume has to be SEO optimized because you're not going to talk to a person. You're just going to submit the resume and it's going to get scanned by some kind of AI bot. And you very rarely, talk to a person. And I'd get a lot of scam people contacting me. Start your own business, work from home. You can be a travel agent. You can, do this. And, or it was like, just invest, $4,000 in our program. And then, your returns will be tenfold. So that's really when I started doing the YouTube more consistently, because I thought, all right, well, I'm monetized on my channel. I guess I can try and, use that as a little bit of income. And having the casita has been a godsend because, I didn't have the income from my job, but I own my house outright, and I can be lean. I can live lean in Panama, whereas in the States, I would have been really freaking out. But here, I'm not freaking out. I have retirement savings. I have dipped into it from time to time because I had some debt buildup. And so I did take some out to pay off that debt. But if I were in this situation in the States, I'd be really stressed out. I am not really stressed out here. I am going through a big kind of renovation expense in my house because my new plan is going to be to put my house on Airbnb because that can earn more than the casita. So this coming May, June, and July, I'm going to have both places on Airbnb, and I'm going to be pet sitting for 2 friends that live in the same building. It's actually where I lived when I first moved to El Valle, and they have a fantastic pool. So I'm really looking forward to using the pool. I'm being resourceful. I'm being, just resourceful, really exercising that credit card, getting it a lot of use lately. In fact, today I'm going to buy more stuff. I have to get a couple of rugs for the bedroom floor. So anyway, the stress level is less here than I would have if I were in the States going through what I'm going through now. I was in the ferreteria, it's like the little hardware store, over the past week, getting bags of cement and bonding glue and tornillos and all the stuff that you need for, little renovation projects. And I remember I used to feel a little intimidated going into businesses like that, and or I was a little nervous to take the bus, was I going to get lost? Was I going to be able to get off on the stop where I was supposed to? Or I felt a little self-conscious, going into a store and not having a grasp of Spanish. And now those things have definitely changed. I walk into the hardware store, buenos dias, hola David, ¿cómo estás? And yesterday I even called on the phone and ordered more bags of concrete or cement. That was a huge thing. When I can start calling places and using Spanish, that is a threshold that I've crossed, because as you know, speaking another language in person can be challenging enough, but on the phone is a whole different aspect. I've taken the bus, not that frequently because, I do have a car, but when I was without my car, I did take the bus down to San Carlos a few times. That was a little treacherous. I had just had a driver that was, really like a Mario Andretti. But then I did also take a bus to the city, navigated, getting a taxi from there. And I find that the best way to greet people is with a smile, eye contact, and a greeting. Buenas tardes, buen dia. And that friendliness can make up for the lack of Spanish that I may have. So that's just something that I, try to be very mindful of when I'm going into stores. Panama definitely gives me the time freedom that I value so dearly. It is interesting though, I'm not retired, and I would like to be retired someday, and I would like more time flexibility, in the sense that I would like to do a little bit more travel and continue building up my channel, the revenue specifically from my channel, because I do want to travel. I want to leave Panama and go to different places. So I'm still, kind of in those productive years and building. And I would like to have just a little more spaciousness with my time. And possibly that can come after, next year, I'm going to have the big house on Airbnb. I'll stay in the casita. So maybe that will kind of increase, income. And then I am planning on going to Boquete in February. So I'm going to have some content about Boquete. I'll talk to a couple of brokers and do some property tours and interview some people. So I'm looking forward to that because I really do enjoy exploring different areas, meeting people, talking to them about how they started their businesses or their life here in Panama. So I'll have some of that content coming for you probably in March, because I'll be there for like 4 or 5 days at the end of February. So all in all, I am loving my life in Panama. No regrets at all about moving here. I probably could have moved here a couple years sooner. Obviously just wasn't ready, at that time in my life. And it definitely keeps my brain engaged. It keeps my creativity peaked, my curiosity, and my sense of adventure and sense of just curiosity, exploring, and possibilities. So I'm looking forward to a lot more of exploring Panama. There's so many areas that I haven't even been to yet. Anyway, if you're thinking about moving anywhere, go visit a few times. I can't tell you the number of people that I see posting in the Facebook groups, we're thinking of moving to Panama. We haven't been there. Where should we live? Well, no one can tell you that. You've got to come visit and see if it's a country that you could even envision yourself living in, and then travel around a little bit. Things change when you're in a new country. For me, I thought it was going to be at the beach. Turned out it was too hot for me, so I'm in the mountains. I thought I was going to be in a condo because that would be safer, and it turns out I love being in a house. I love having my garden. I thought I was going to live in this house forever and just, die here. Now I'm thinking about selling the house, and, that's a significant amount of money that I could have in my 70s to go do some travel and then live closer to Panama City, where I'd be closer to medical care should I need that. So even though I say how, I'm detached from the concept of forever, I still fall into that trap. I thought this was going to be my place. And as much as I love my house, it will be a challenge to practice non-attachment to it, but I think that will also be good for my personal growth. Have a wonderful week. I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in and